I'm feeling amazed and I'm hungry. All right, we have been having great conversations around transformation, mindset, skill set, tool set, and the session that's coming up, we would like to advance the conversation on bringing about profitable outcomes. To do that, we have two great personalities with us today. First up, I would like to introduce and welcome Mr. Amit Mehta. Amit heads training and certification business for AWS, Amazon here in India. He's a passionate leader, helping organizations and individuals transform with new age skilling initiatives. So that's Amit, and we generally tend to talk about what people do, and sometimes we forget who we are. Like Ashish was helping us to realize who we are. I would like to announce something about Amit, which is very personal and very dear to my heart. He's a humble human being and does a great work around a lot of charity. If I have to call out an incident, during COVID second lockdown, he was out on the streets carrying oxygen cylinders in his car while most of us were inside our homes. So a great man. Welcome, Amit. Welcome. Thank you. I would also like to acknowledge Abhishek, who heads channel business at AWS India, for making this happen. Thank you so much. Over to you, Amit.
You know, it's a tough act following Ashish. Ashish, thank you for, if you're still around, thank you for setting that context. I'll really, over the next 15, 20 minutes, I'll take humility and audacity as the two themes. There's a passion that I bring to the table, and I want to represent that to you. And if at the end of this session, I can get a few of you to join us in that, in that bigger vision, it will be great. So at AWS, I think we believe we are in the front seat of the biggest rock show on the planet. And we are in the midst of digital transformation initiatives. I'm happy to be here amongst customers and partners. Our vision for India is to enable builders to build a better India. And for that, for me, what it means is how can we help bridge the digital skills gap in India. I'm going to keep the conversation around digital skills. Having run businesses for many years, 29 years in the Indian industry business, for me, at the last stint, I realized skill was coming in the way of transformation initiatives. And I said, why don't I join on that part of the agenda and see how I can progress that? So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to share with you what are some of the things, because I have had the opportunity to work with CIOs, I've had the opportunities to work with CHROs and business leaders. And I wanted to present to you, given that we have seen what we have seen over the last 2-3 years, and just in terms of implementation, what are we seeing? Three things really. I'm going to share with you some data points. These data points are no-brainers, you already know them. But I'm going to share with you the story behind those data points, which are very relevant. There is implications for that, for the learning organization, for the business. I'm going to kind of give our point of view on it. And it's on that point of view I'm going to challenge you. And finally, where are we going from this? So fundamentally, we all know that the pandemic accelerated digitization. What you don't know, the story that goes behind that digitization. So for instance, during the peak of COVID, RBL Bank wanted to move 40 applications in 40 days. We talked about customer experience, right? I mean, you heard the BFSF panel. 40 applications in 40 days. Now imagine what that does to the business. So the business leader comes and says, we got to do this because we got to keep the customer experience relevant and there has to be continuity. The CTO comes in and says, listen, I have so much on-premise infrastructure, I can't suddenly move to the cloud. And he says, okay, where are the skills to do this? So we step in and we say, okay, listen, we'll help you migrate the workload and applications. We'll get a consulting. We'll give you point-in-time training, but you have to continue beyond that. And then once we do that, who's going to maintain that perpetual learning? So in a BFSI environment, you move to the cloud and then you start using data to make personalized recommendations. We heard about AI and ML, but you can't do a point-in-time training, be done with it, and you can't, as L&D leaders, what we realized was you can't be the recipient of a list which will say so many people to be trained on Python, so many people to be trained on SQL, blah, blah. And we realized that was happening. So the challenge that we had to the bankers and to the organization we work with, listen, what are you really doing about scale? You'll get to a point, but at some point you can't scale. Paytm, 3.5 times is the number of transactions that went up per subscriber during that period. Paytm, now imagine a fintech company having to suddenly expand the interface, looking at security postures. And you can't suddenly get people on the shop. You have to suddenly train and upskill people. How do you do that? And we are sitting here and we are looking at what is the CIO saying, where is the L&D in this, and what is the business saying? So what we realized, CIO was bothered only about tech. Business was bothered about, I need it tomorrow. I need it actually as of yesterday. And L&D was saying, hey, listen, where do I get the resources from? So that's kind of the paramount picture. So fundamentally, in essence, there's an issue of training, need for digital skills, both from an employee standpoint. It's important. So we talked about, does it matter to them? They're disengaged. You know, guess what? They'll be obsolete. If they don't really skill up, the technologies that are coming up, which refresh every 6 months, is going to make them obsolete. That's the reality of the day. So that's the first part. Where is L&D when business is making that decision points? We can firefight a here and now battle, but long term, you have to be engaged. And the only way to do that is humble realization from my side. We just fight our way out. Because listen, you give me a laundry list, you don't necessarily give me a budget, and what about the future? I think we talked about what is the impact of training. It's a tough one. So the impact of training can't happen if you don't know what's the end game to be played on. So CSAT scores don't matter, we talked about it, don't matter. So unless and until you're tied at the hip. So at Amazon, what we try and do, we do what we call a Kirkpatrick model. Heard about Kirkpatrick model? So can we get to the level 3 and 4 of that? It's tough. So the challenge that we face is when we do a delivery training, what happens after that is it strategic or is it just done? That's where we would really invite you to join us in this. So there is a shortfall in training. Number of people having training plans vis-a-vis actual plans is a challenge. Training is not just about these point-in-time interventions. How do you put that perpetual culture? Give you some data points. India, up until 2021, had 12% of the force digitally trained. And this is when I say digitally trained, this is across the spectrum of skills that they have. This year alone, that is going to grow by 7% more. So what we're saying is at the end of 2023, 19% of India's digital workforce needs to be digitally skilled. And by the way, the number of skills that are coming up, a lot of them are cloud related. Whether it is data, whether it is compute, whether it is cyber security, AI, all of these are delivered in the cloud today. So the question then is, are people and workers really confident? And the question is, how are we delivering? We talked about how we're delivering training. And this is where I think we asked really, what's the challenge in training? So clearly, there is lack of time, obviously. So we realize you can't take people off the shop floor and say, join in a 3-day class. And by the way, 24 hours later, you can actually become productive, right? You can't do that. So lack of time is a real issue. But the question is, have L&D and have the business and CTO organization join in and say, listen, where does the business need to be? What does the scenario look like from an as is to be, and what's the gap? And therefore, what's the learning plan over the next 3 or 5 years? And therefore, let's plan it. And that's where we also understand other things. L&D integration with talent acquisition. Talent acquisition teams are going into new hire programs, hiring from colleges. L&D suddenly needs to work on the new hire training, and then you need to put them on production flows. The question is how integrated is chain, and more often than not we realize at the high end, at the largest GSIs, they have got it. But when we go into some of the other organizations, it's broken. So how do you look at existing skill set? How do you look at new skill set? And how do you tie that to a business initiative? I think that's the challenge where we are now actually talking to the CHROs and the L&D officials. And in the meantime, I think you have heard about these. The story behind this is the following. So when we say remote work and hybrid work, just to give you an example, we delivered something like 2,000 plus classes. These are instructor-led classes across, let's say, 1 year. Now the question is, we realize that people are not able to sit through 8 hours a day, 9 to 5, because it is not effective. So what started to happen, first, convert in classroom sessions to VILT, because that is what COVID forced us to do. But then elongating 3 hours to, 3-day classes to 5-day classes is another area. And then the question is, hey, listen, all of it doesn't need to be instructor-led. Can you do some self-paced? And can you then do some, in class? And can you marry that off? And can you, by the way, tie that into performance management system? So best practice example of that, linking certifications to promotion outcomes, those are some of the interventions that work well when you tie in the CHRO and the L&D organization together. Retaining talent, I think here is the thing that we realize. A lot of if you heard, 2021 was all about developers jumping ship, right? 23% jump in just talent. Why? It happened because they were jumping from traditional organization banks to startups. But then 2022, the funding winter set in. So all these people who were suddenly jumping ship to go to a startup, they actually came back and said, listen, we want to come back home. So now the question that comes is, what is it that is really attracting this talent pool? And what we found out was the ability to work on the latest tech stack. What does India need today? What does the digital revolution or transformation need? Lot of developers, lot of security professionals, lot of cloud professionals. The question then is, how quickly can we get them ready? And what's the tech stack we are willing to build? And that is the attracting, and that's where that helps in retaining talent. And we now, as we have seen the correcting trend, we've seen the inflation go down, and I think the bigger thing that you have still not sorted for, and it's a big question, 2023, participation of Indian women in the workforce dipped 19%. We are number 3 from the bottom. We all have diversity initiatives. Now here is where what we see in your organizations, you have talent acquisition, you have L&D team, you have a diversity hiring team. And by the way, how are you looking at that? So number of women who actually left because of COVID, they had to take care of families, they want to now come back. What's the diversity initiative? How are you looking at diversity and recruiting for that? And by the way, a lot of people lost jobs from traditional industries. They want to now join the tech industry. So what do you do? And that's where one of the things we wanted to really talk to you about is this whole notion of how is it broken and how do we want to fix it, our point of view. So what we are fundamentally first trying to solve at the education system, I think the new education policy, which is outcome-based learning, has the same potential as our liberalization policy had in 1991. Once you have an outcome-based learning, and students can accrue credits and continue those credits over a period of life cycle, through their life cycle, it makes sense. So what we are first saying is, our mental model is, we will align our courses to the National Skills Qualification Framework, work with an AICTE, work with colleges to ensure that these courses which are relevant for the industry are embedded right there, such that the problem of day one productivity gets solved right at the college. So when they are out of the gate, they know there's an employment opportunity, which is the invitation to you. Can we work with you and say, listen, India Inc. needs about 200,000 professionals over the course of 24 months to solve the digital skill gap. Will you join us in a campaign which says, yeah, we'll guarantee employment should you meet these yardsticks? Then we'll recruit, we'll work with RPS, we'll work with NIIT, we'll get the right people to work and get into the pool. And then the other thing is upskilling and reskilling. So what does the business outcome look like for you in the business? And what does the upskilling plan look like? One of the problems that we realized, one of the largest GSIs, what they were saying was they were throwing pretty much everyone through a course. And what they realized, that these people were not necessarily deployed in projects. They were just coming to the class and then they were redundant. So are you putting the right people, or are people just joining classes because, hey, it's a learning opportunity? So who are you targeting by persona? Developers, data engineers. One of the things we realized, this mental model of critical skills, important to the business now, but there's talent pool available, like developers. But there's scarce skills. These scarce skills, you don't have talent. Data engineers, you don't have data engineers. You don't have data scientists. So how would you look at a critical skill intersection and a scarce skill intersection? What does that mean for HR and L&D? Right? This is where, that's the first leg of the struggle. So the invitation to you is, join us in giving potential employment opportunities to students, and we'll get them ready for you. The second is, a lot of funding scheme happens, whether it is NASSCOM Future Skills, whether it is NCVT, whether it is Ministry of Skills, they funnel in a lot of problems. The problem is, so for instance, Dharmendra Pradhan announced that we'll train about 1 million students across digital skills. It didn't say how, when, by what time, are they certified, not certified. That's where it gets broken, and that's where the collective responsibility of all of us comes in and say, listen, this is how we're going to land it. And by the way, if you are subsidizing it, can we funnel that subsidy back into people who really deserve it? So working with organizations, good partners as NIIT, as RPS, as AWS, we are right there working with them. And the final one is the job opportunity. We are at an inflection point. The inflection point is the same as India was when they were looking at, for instance, the software industry, the IT BPM industry. All of you, in terms of passion, you can help create the biggest darn talent pool for the world. And that's where the employment opportunity comes in, and that's where thinking strategy long-term comes in. And so these are different programs. Essentially, we're looking at working with colleges, diversifying the talent pool. We're looking at working with hiring professionals, working with RPS and NIIT to train the existing professionals where you kind of engage. And then we're looking at diversity programs. So for instance, we have a program which is a 12-week program, runs 9 to 5, funded by us, where people like Accenture, Capgemini, they come and say, listen, you train people, through this 12-week people, we promise you, will take people from these cohorts. Right now, we have something like 3,000 people in this. We have a 70% placement rate. But the money was funded by these corporates. So can you get in and get the CSR arm funding, and you can get a whole lot of talent pool which may not necessarily leave you fast. The attrition may happen from people who are in tier 1, tier 2 cities, but what about tier 3, tier 4 cities? If we were to join hands and enable them, they can potentially come in and stay longer. Your attrition and women won't leave faster. So the change of mix, when you're looking at your attrition and retention problem, will drastically change when you change the mix of people, and that's where we are actually playing the role through programs like She Dares and AWS Restart. And as I said, end game is employability. The same game we played many eons ago when we actually supplied the talent pool to the industry on software skills. That's the game we want to play. We have an inflection point. There's a forcing function in the market. Industry needs it, and we need to get together. So some examples of universities we work with, the way you can partner with talent teams, your new hire teams. Okay, what are the colleges you're willing to recruit from? We'll actually go ahead, prepare them to your specs, which could mean we need so many full stack developers, we need so many cloud architects, we need so many cybersecurity people. We'll enable them, create a bench for you, talent pipeline as a service, source train deployment model, whatever you call it, and we'll actually supply that such that when your business needs to scale up, you're not looking at paying, you're not actually scrambling for talent. So if you have universities, we can work with them. Otherwise, you can work with these universities where we're already working. And these are some examples of, I would say, I will just summarize here. The best case example is PTM. What they have now done is, one, L&D, CTO organization, business works together, all PTM entities, train about 3,000 people, 60% of their workforce, improve their productivity, time to productivity from 12 weeks to about 5 weeks, because they put their new hire programs or hires to a very intense cloud development program, right? So that's the opportunity that we have. And now what they're saying is, can we look at talent differently? Can we set up a cloud center of excellence? I think that's the point we need to get to, and that's the invitation and challenge that I have for you as a business. So with that, thank you. I know it was rushed given the time, but happy to really have that conversation and take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amit. Next up, we have another great personality with us, Dr. Srinivasan. He is Regional Director, Managing Director for PMI South Asia. He's with us here today. A bit about him. Before that, I want to talk about PMI. How many of us have come across PMI in our life at some point in time in our profession? Can you say yes? Yes. Okay, great, great. Very old organization. Personally, I was associated with PMI for over 15 years running PMI training and certification business. I've seen all the glory. I've also seen a point when it was stagnant. But PMI is very different now. Not just their logo, but they have a beautiful portfolio that is put up last 3-4 years and working on many new areas. So one such area is in the IT systems area. Srini heads the IT system strategic development group and many other new initiatives. So he's part of one of the important person to see PMI as a new transform PMI that we see now. Happy to have here Srini. Over to you. Yeah,
Thank you, Hari. Hello, everyone. I've been given a very, very big responsibility. And that is to prevent you from going to lunch now and waiting for 15 minutes to listen to somebody who's going to ramble on. And I was also very humbled by that responsibility because I heard the MC earlier say that she's inviting eminent speakers to the podium. That rules me out, so I'm going to stand here. How many of you are investors in startups? Anybody? A few? How many of you would like to be investors in startups? A lot. Great. In that case, I'd like you to volunteer to be angel investors for the next 15 minutes. Imagine that this is Shark Tank. Imagine that I'm here to make a pitch to you, and imagine that in 15 minutes you will decide whether you invest in my idea or not. So the thesis is this: the talent environment is broken. So what? What might be a glue that puts the broken pieces together? That's really what I want to make a pitch to you for in the next 12 minutes or so. And then you let me know whether there's going to be some money coming my way or not. How does this work, Swati? This one? Ah, okay, got it. Oops. No, I've got it. I want to start with a little quiz. There are 3 pictures there. Starting from your left, anybody know what that picture represents? Solar energy, but yes, you're halfway there. This is Kochi International Airport. I'll come back to that in a minute. The middle picture, does that ring a bell? Cheetah, the Cheetah Translocation Program that has brought 8 Namibian cheetahs reintroduced to India for the first time. I'll come back to that as well. And the last picture on your right, any guesses what that is? It's a bridge. It's the Padma River Bridge in Bangladesh. It's a dual-purpose rail and road bridge. I'll come back to that too in a minute. What is the common thread in these 3 examples, you might ask? The common thread is that in each of these cases, the people who are putting these projects together decided to go beyond the obvious, decided to step into the unknown a little bit, decided to take a risk and do something that has typically not been done. So in the case of Kochi International Airport, there was an opportunity to put new generators in to make it more energy efficient, but they decided that this would be the first and only totally solar energy powered airport in India. And it was built for them by Bosch, a company that many of you know. In the case of the Namibian cheetahs, never been done before in the history of wildlife rehabilitation. Can you imagine the kind of coordination that is required? Just within the government of India, 8 ministries, number of public bodies, the government of Namibia, the government of South Africa, the wildlife conservation authorities in all of these countries. Can you imagine the kind of work that needs to be done to just think about this and then do it? And in the case of the Padma River project, the bridge, the beauty of it was constructed in a point which was engineeringly difficult to construct, but the reason they did that was at that point they were able to connect 21 districts in southern Bangladesh to the capital Dhaka, which was not possible before, especially, as you know, in the monsoons, the kind of rain that Bangladesh gets. So that is the pitch that I want to make to you. The glue that could possibly put the broken pieces of the talent environment together is the ability that you have as leaders to help individuals and your own organization to go beyond the obvious, wherever possible. How to make that part of your DNA, your personal DNA, your organizational DNA. Here are 2 organizations. One, the one on the left, many of you probably know, Johnson Controls. The one on the right, if some of you are anybody here from Bangalore? Yeah, you will know that name. Let me tell you why I want to talk about this. Johnson Controls, about a year ago, got an order from the US federal government to set up 40 COVID emergency care centers in the US. It was a $1 billion project, 1 billion with a B. And Johnson Controls was asked to set up the complete technology infrastructure for these 40 sites. But here's the catch. The government said you have 21 days to get it done. Not 6 months, not 9 months, not 12 months. For a $1 billion project, 21 days to get it done. Bharat Electronics, some of you know them. They're a public sector undertaking, not typically known, like most PSUs, for innovation, not typically known for going beyond the obvious. But when the Prime Minister, during COVID, said, I want organizations to put up their hands to help make ventilators, which were in really short supply. Bharat Electronics, which is a high-end maker of defense electronic systems, never been in something as mundane as ventilators, overnight reconfigured 2 of their manufacturing lines to make ventilators. So the next morning, they were making ventilators. So the moral of that story is, it is possible for us to transform our own organizations to make going beyond the obvious part of the DNA. The world that I come from, project management, many of you are veteran project managers. Hari, as he mentioned, lived and breathed project management for so many years, and still does. Everybody talks about transformation, but what does that look like? What does it look like? Here are some examples for you. Transformation project management today, in fact, Samir is not here, he and I were talking during the break. A lot has changed. It is not waterfall, your dad's waterfall and my dad's waterfall methodology anymore. It's about agility, it's about transformation, but what has changed? For example, Today, many of you know in your organizations, it's not about time, cost, and budget. It's about value stream. It's about the delivery of value streams that are going to be important for the business. Something radically different, something that has changed. It is not business as usual. If you look at the role of a project manager today, it's very atypical. You and I probably remember the days when we were focused on scheduling, we were focused on meeting notes, we were focused on making sure that there were blocks of activity that were ticked off. Today it's about you being an aggregator, you becoming an Ola or an Uber of your own project to bring different people together that you've never worked with before. Can you imagine in today's project in organizations that many of you represent, it is possible for you not to just have a core project team, but to have people from different functions within your organization, like procurement, like HR, like marketing, on the team? Can you imagine that you have customers representatives on your team? Can you imagine that you might even have competitors on your team because they bring specific technology? So this is a very different set of stakeholders that you have to manage. So take the example, anybody here that owns a connected car? Like a MG or any of the others? Okay. So imagine that you're the program manager for a connected car. What is your role? Your role is not about making sure the OEMs are supplying things. That's a given. Your role now is to work with all these young startups who are bringing these specific apps that you have to integrate into your vehicle platform. So that's a very, very different game. Working with young startups, working with understanding their technology, and working with making sure how the interplay between all of these apps should happen, the interoperability. So those are the kind of things that have changed. So I want to leave you with one other learning that we have as Project Management Institute working with organizations throughout the globe. We all talk about how to survive. So I've suggested to you in my pitch that one way to put the broken pieces together is to create an organizational DNA of going beyond the obvious. And the next thing I'm about to suggest to you is here are some attributes that you may want to encourage, both in yourselves as professionals, but more importantly, in your organization. It's really about collaboration. You know that better than I do. Just take collaboration, for instance. The way that you will have to collaborate on projects tomorrow is going to be radically different than today. Take vaccine development during COVID. Many of you are engineers. Anybody here hold patents in your name or your company's name? Many of you are technologists. You will appreciate how difficult it is for you to share your information, your technology, your body of work. But during COVID, these scientists put that aside, took all of their personal intellectual capital, put it into one common box. And from that, they used AI and ML to draw the most important lessons and then use that to accelerate the vaccine development. Imagine the kind of collaboration that has to take place. I'm out of time. So I want to stop here and just request you to reflect as angel investors on whether this pitch makes sense to you. And if so, by show of hands, whether you're willing to at least consider investing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, But most importantly, I appreciate your passion and I appreciate your commitment. And I want to make sure that we come out with an app or a product that you're going to be proud of as an investor. Thank you so much.